So I'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. Yeah, great. We'll do a quick roll call so that we can confirm the quorum. I'm Lisa Sanders. Penny Vanelli here. Shayna is not on, is that correct? Okay. Michael Ripley.
There.
Lois Carlo. Katie Murphy is not on, correct?
She will not be attending.
Okay, thank you. Adrian Williams is here. Jerry Usi is here, and Donovan Nichols is here. Caitlin Miller and Ann Hinshaw have not been able to be sworn in yet because the Chester town clerk was out of town. We do have our quorum of 7. So with that, I'm looking for a motion to approve tonight's agenda, or if there are any additions. Great, we've got a first from Lois and a second from Jerry. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Excellent. So then we go into our first public comment period. So if you're online, please raise your hand. Anybody in the room?
You're very interested.
Great. Thanks. That brings us to new business in our discussion. I think it would be super helpful, Lane, if you would just introduce what it is that we're talking about and why we need to talk about it.
Just a minute, throw this up. There's just a couple slides, probably 10 minutes, but if there's questions along the way, feel free to interrupt. Folks that are online recognize that I can't see you. So putting a hand up may not get your questions answered, but you're welcome to just speak up. With the failure of the Green Mountain budget, it puts the district in a position where we can't enter into contracts that we don't have money to pay for. And one of the deadlines that is coming up is this April 15th deadline. We have to have staff contracts and staff hands. Why that becomes a problem, and it's kind of a procedural thing with the failure of the budget, is that if nothing is done, the teachers' contracts are going to automatically renew on April 15th. And this could potentially, without that budget, put us in a position where we are obligated to pay contracts that we do not have the money for and that we know right now we do not have the money for, which would be improper. Only option that we have is under the master agreement, Article 15.1, and that's to contemplate a reduction in force, also called the RIF for folks that are new to the ed language. The first step is to notify the association of any contemplated reductions in staff. That has been done. The second step is to provide the association with an opportunity to discuss any contemplation of risks, which is kind of the purpose of tonight's meeting, to provide folks with that opportunity. One of the things that I'm going to recommend, and when I get into a little bit of the numbers, I think it will make sense why, is that the board set up for another special meeting to actually provide some direction in terms of what you want to do in terms of the budget revote, as well as decide if there are going to be RIF notifications that go out. That would have to be done before the April 15th deadline, preferably prior to April 14th to give us time to respond and to react. And again, I want the staff to know that this is really important. This is not a punitive action. It's a safeguard, given the fact that we don't have a budget. This is not a meeting that I want to have. I'm kind of sad that we have to have it because the budget didn't pass. But as part of our due diligence in terms of the fiduciaries on behalf of the communities is something that has to be considered. Talk a little bit about the numbers to give us an idea what it means not having a budget, especially if we can't get one passed by June 30th. 16 VSA 566 limits districts without an approved budget by January 30th, which right now that's us, to operate at no more than 87% of the most recently approved budget. So not what we asked for, but the budget that we approved last year. In terms of real numbers, this is what that means. The budget that we put out in front of the community was a level service budget. In other words, we weren't asking for anything more. We were just trying to maintain what we were doing in this current year. So that was 19.3 million. The last approved budget that the district had was 18.6 million. If we take 87% of that, this is the money that you potentially can obligate yourself to, is this 16.2 million. What does this mean? That if you do nothing and the staff contracts all go into effect on April 15th and there's no cuts to programs or services or anything like that, you're obligated for 19.3 million, even though this is the amount that you can get. So you'll be 3.1 million in terms of a deficit, and it's illegal in Vermont to have a deficit. And so one of the reasons that we're talking about this is there's no way to prepare for a $3.1 million cut without considering production and staff. One of the things I do want to say, especially hopefully that, you know, there's community members that are out there watching and folks will watch the video of this a little bit later, is to really just be blunt about what the impact is when a budget fails. We've talked about this kind of ad nauseum over the last couple of years, is there's very little change in tax rates that we can create locally. The education funding system is not set up that way. We could make dramatic cuts in the tax rates and what people are paying in terms of taxes. There's going to be just a minor change in that if we do that. We're in a position where you're having to consider to RIF staff members, right, until funding is secured. That destroys morale with the teachers and it creates uncertainty. And uncertainty is a bad thing, because when you have uncertainty, if people aren't sure if they've got a job next year or not, usually what happens is all the good people you have jump ship. Other impact is that the community is going to be paying for the follow-up elections. That's money that's going to come out of pocket. And if we get past June 30th and we don't have a budget, you still have to run a school by law next year. And so it means you're borrowing money probably up to that 16, whatever it was, million. And the community is the one who's going to pay the interest on that loan.
Jeff?
Yep. Sorry about that. Go ahead.
There's Jeff Hands. There's Jeff Hands. Maybe he didn't
He's
realize.
muted now, I think. It's an accident.
So again, this is why we're here, is to have that discussion, which is appropriate to have. And again, the recommendation is that, you know, the board meets again to talk about, you know, risks and to provide guidance in terms of what it wants us to do, cuts if any.
And the upside is that as long as the budget does pass, then we will not have to have the reductions in staff at all. So that's the plan anyway. But we need to have the discussion anyway. And the other part of this is it is a discussion. And so we should feel free to say what we have to say, including the Teachers Association and support staff. And please.
Is the copy of the budget somewhere in that school board folder?
It's also on, it's on the front page of the website, the trsu.org.
Okay.
Do we know when the next election on the budget's going to be held?
We don't. So we're gonna talk at the end of this meeting about the need for another special meeting before April 16th. The hope is that on April 16th, we could be voting on a budget, whether that is the same one that went up for a vote last time or a modification in some way. So that if we're voting, if the board is voting on the budget on April 16th, then the vote on that could be 30 to 40 days after. So that would be beginning of May, first half of May, which would have it, hopefully, the 30 days after that, then approved before the start of the new fiscal year. Yes, so we have one more shot, though, to pass the budget before the start of the fiscal year.
Lane, have you and Cheryl made any, or sat down and discussed any potentials? Or are there any,
Well, my question was gonna be like, if we had to cut, what is the least impactful thing?
So for 3.3 million or 3.1 million?
No. Cutting the budget to a number that the voters maybe get us closer to what last year's budget was.
So,
That $500,000-ish.
yeah, so, and try to see if I can put this in context. So we did a level service budget. If you did a level funded budget, it means you're asking the voters next year for what we're spending this year. That would mean, because the cost of things get more expensive, that would mean a $743,000 cut. So you're talking probably 7 or 8 staff members if you want to put it in terms of staff. There are programmatic cuts that we could make, but again, it's cutting programs. We might be able to come up with a couple $100,000 in terms of program cuts, but it's going to have an impact on our ability to deliver on the mission of the school and the board. And it's also probably going to impact staff. So again, any reduction from that level funded means cutting something.
Yeah.
So that's important for the community to know.
so my question was, have you and Cheryl had any discussions about it yet? Has there been any,
If there were,
Objection.
if there were cuts, especially ones that impacted staff, the idea would be that we've got the Act 73 enrollment minimums that we have to meet, and supposed to be getting them in place this coming year to get them started. Any cuts that we made would probably be best directed towards accomplishing that if there were cuts. Yeah. To put that, just to put things in perspective, that 3.1 million would require, and with a couple 100,000 of program cuts that we could do easily, it would require cutting like 30 staff members, 30 to 40 staff members. Big chunk if we don't get our.
you would first focus any type of program cuts or staff cuts around enrollment?
That would make the most sense, given that we're obligated to do that under the regs anyway.
Lane, you can go into the year knowing that you have 87% and still have a vote in the fall,
Yes.
correct?
Yeah.
So if you didn't pass in May, you could still throw it out with the hypothetical, like, we're gonna run out of money in end of April if we don't get this passed.
Yeah, but under the law, the town is required to pass a budget. Kind of silly, they have the option to pass it or not, but they're required to pass it.
Would non-union staff be equally considered?
That's what I was just gonna ask.
Yeah. Right off the kind of this initial kind of thought process here, and this is why this discussion is good. One of the reasons that we invited the Support Staff Association is because, yes, the one place where we've got some questions is whether or not it could touch any of the staff that supply special education services, because those services are federally mandated.
Can funding that Ludlow Mount Holly contributes towards be touched, like central office?
I'm not sure of the question.
Like, can central office employees who money comes from Ludlow Mount Holly, not just from Green Mountain, does it have to just be money that Green Mountain pays towards, or can it be money that is jointly paid from both sides of the district?
Yeah, the money isn't really intermingled. Basically, from the administrative unit, the TRSU unit, the central office, it basically bills out the services as the costs happen. for the
Okay.
most part.
So I guess my question to rephrase it then is just because it's the Green Mountain side that didn't pass, it's not just the funds that impact Green Mountain because it's a TRSU budget.
Unless you change central office budget, you could have a reduction in central office and not trigger a revote. You could not have an increase in central office without triggering a revote on the Ludlow Mount Holly side.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
And my understanding, Lane, is that it would be the board's role to say, for example, we want something halfway in between level service and level funding, or we want this much, we want the budget down to this number. And then you would be proposing something.
So the, kind of talk about, operations, board is responsible, right, policy budget. But it's budget at a high level. The board wouldn't be coming in and saying, oh, this person, that person, that person. The way that the board would do it would be to say, hey, based upon, the budget that failed, we want to see what it would look like with a 5% cut, with the cuts geared towards fulfilling Act 73, something along those lines. And then it's our job to go in and operationally take a look at how we can do that with a minimal impact on operations.
I mean, I don't think it's a bad idea to do that. We gotta have that in our pocket, I think. Either way. So.
Though it's also the case that both of the last two failed budgets then passed without any further reductions.
Remember, I think it was 37 votes somewhere, give or
Yeah,
take a vote or two.
we're under.
Yeah, for Green Mountain.
Maybe if they understand the consequences.
Well, that's kind of what I was saying last meeting, it's like. Gotta talk to people because, and I get it, like Chester, the 760,000 is if we cut that back, Chester taxpayers are saving $80. I get times are tough for everyone right now, but in the big picture, $80 to have, 5-8 teachers fired. I don't see that as a benefit. I just don't. I'm all for saving money. I just don't. I don't think this is the end.
Jerry, was that $80? Were you just speaking off the cuff? Is that per
No, I believe I
$100,000
figured out it was like $84
per
to
year?
get us back. That's what like a Chester taxpayer would save if we passed the same amount of last year's budget.
Is that per $100,000 on their on their mortgage or on their property
I
or
think
whatever?
it's total?
So,
Well,
So,
it depends
Or
on.
that's
academic-
700,000.
I could share the chart.
I'd love to see
I
that.
did the calculations. So it depends upon which town you're from.
Sure.
What the impact is going to be for the cuts. But for every $100,000 cut from the budget, in some cases, your overall annual savings would be $6 for every 100,000.
Yeah.
In
I figured that
some
just-
districts, I think it was as high as, you're going to save 18 annually for every 100,000 that's cut. So, to cut $1 million from the budget, 6 times 10, to save $60.
That's my.
It's money.
Yeah.
But that's what I mean when I say, no matter how deep we cut, we're not going to make a significant impact on those tax rates. It's just the system that's set up.
I think to some degree there has to be some acknowledgement of, if you pay attention to statewide politics, a lot of these budgets were not passed for performance, measures against Act 73 and against just the state of the state. So, just because it's, you're only gonna save $8 here or $6 there, I don't think that that's actually what people are concerned about. They're concerned about the bigger.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And we had the superintendent's meeting the all superintendent's meeting today in Montpelier, which I got back down from, meeting with the legislatures about this. They have some things they're talking about, but they can't get anything together that's going to come out of either the House committee or the Senate committee. So the tax issues that people are feeling, is a legislative problem and cannot be addressed at the school level. And so, you know, if folks aren't concerned about taxes and I'm concerned about taxes, well, you got to start talking with the legislators. That's where the action has to happen.
Lane, is there any conversation, seeing as like this seems to happen, I don't know if it's 2 or 3 years in a row now, and also like TRSU doesn't recognize town meeting day, and I wonder what conversations take place at town meeting day that maybe, you know, constituents are frustrated and there's no way for, you know, teachers to attend those and talk about what goes on at the school, and so it's really easy to pick, hey, this is going up, and no one can speak there about what takes place.
Yeah, I spent some time going around to reached out to all the select boards, and so I did, you know, go to the select board meetings to kind of talk about the budget and impact and how ed funding works. What's interesting is that, right, the school district and the towns are separate entities, and oftentimes we have meetings at the same time, and so it's hard to be able to kind of float back and forth between them. But there is no reason why, you know, if we've got faculty living in towns and whatnot, that they can't go to that town meeting and, you know, as part of the open comment or the public comment, you know, make some statements. It's also good, you know, potentially have board members, if they're available and free to go, who are steeped in, you know, what the budget is that they've passed and what the logic was behind it to be able to answer questions at those meetings.
I pushed pretty hard before Chester's town meeting to get people to pass.
Chester was one of the ones that had me there. They had a pretty good conversation, I think.
If we can have that kind of information publicly available with some kind of sign in front of the, you know, whether someone's holding it outside the town hall that simply states, you know, $6 saved for every 100,000. Like, I think it's really hard. I think it's when people hear $3.1 million or when they hear an increase of some $180,000, I think it's really easy for there to be a strong reaction. And then you break it down for what that actually is. And I think people would have the same reaction that Jerry's having, is that people don't want to lose staff or services or sports or whatever it is for, you know, if you have a property worth $300,000, you're talking, you know, $18 over the course of the year, or like $1.20 a month. So when you break it down like that, I think it's important for people to hear those pieces of.
In Chester, the Telegraph and the Journal are both read pretty widely. Maybe you could put a letter explaining what you told us.
It gets sent out to the community, goes out on Newsflash, goes out on Front Porch Forum, goes out through our listserv. It's in the annual reports that go out. It's quite well broadcast. We also run multiple open forums to, you know, try to get people in. Usually, depending upon what we're talking about, you know, we might get a handful of folks at the open forums, but they do tend to watch the videos afterwards, which is good. So, you know, if there's other avenues, I'm always happy to be open to it. But,
It's just that it's pretty popular right now. Both of those papers, one electronic and one paper, get read pretty widely. And
They should be covering. That'll be.
Yeah,
They
explain
cover
what-
other things that aren't.
Oh,
very
yeah, no, I agree. But you're the one with the right information, so I hope they will call you and ask you to tell them what you just told us.
Has this board ever considered a like social media presence? I know that can be fairly toxic sometimes, but I just wonder if people get the majority of their information from there, if that's worth.
that's the other piece, is all this gets posted on the Facebook pages of the schools.
Okay.
The district. That we also, you're making me kind of think back through from, you know, 2-3 months ago now. We also tend to ship it off to the active PTGs, and they're pretty good about piggybacking stuff out on their
Okay.
social media. Just that tends to be a little bit more active. You know, Cavendish is active, but that seems to be more active on the Ludlow Mount Holly side.
Okay. Is it your goal tonight, Lane, to figure out what it would look like to run off of 87%? Like, I guess I'm just curious what.
No, my responsibility tonight is to basically tell the board that, you know, if no action is taken before April 15th, you are and no budget in place, you are going to be putting yourself in a position where you have financial obligation you can't pay. And so they need to take an action procedurally to prevent that from happening. But I can, because it would be based upon that 3.1 million. And so, you know, if we're talking RIFs and we're talking program cuts, it would have to add up to that 3.1 million to get us through until there's a vote. The board's job then is to work to get a budget in place, direct us in terms of what we want to go out to vote. We can run the numbers and we can start the communication process with the community to try to get the vote passed.
Forum after the meeting, the next meeting that we have. Between that, the meeting when we pick a new budget and the meeting and the time the town votes, we've got 30 days at least in there, 40 days. If we could have a forum in Chester during that time.
I'd like that one beforehand.
But I have them anyway, but I can't have them until I know what you've told me. Well, just try to get the voters to vote on.
Catch 22.
Yeah, so we're kind of in a holding pattern until that happens.
So what happens if we reach that point where we are unable to pass the budget? I understand, you know, we're obligated to the 87%, that sort of thing, but said it went against the law. So then what happens?
You keep trying, and then you're stuck with that 87% cap. Now, to get to that 16 million, so that means that you're starting off having to cut everything to reduce that 3.1 million. At that point in time, you don't have a choice. So any RIFs letters and things that went out at that point in time would be, you know, permanent until a budget was passed. And at that point in time, you could be the middle of the school year, you probably lost all your employees. There will be some money that comes into the state. So if we're talking about that 16 million, that 87%, there will be some money that comes in from the state. To get up to that full 16 million, the rest of it would have. And then that's where you get into paying interest on millions of dollars to run the school. But you have to run a school. The statute tells you what you're able to run it with if you don't have it.
Now, if teachers were RIF to meet that, between, like, let's say April 15th, you didn't renew a contract, and then the budget passes and you decide you want to run the program, those teachers do contractually have the first dibs to come back.
We need that. We'll send them a contract.
I just want everyone to know that's a long time in teacher like there's probably a lot of built places that are looking for hiring around that timeline. That's a pretty popular time to be starting interviews for teachers, is end of April, early May, because of that same situation. So I just want people to know that, like, yes, we could make hypotheticals and then reach back out and offer a contract, but people could be making alternative plans at that point.
And again, community, that's the consequence of voting down the budget.
Sure.
Did you might have answered, I didn't catch it. Because special education is federally mandated, you can't look at that.
I'm going to look at it a little deeper, but my off the cuff answer is because those services are agreed to and required. I don't think you can cut those stuff. They have to supply those services under Individuals with Disabilities Education Act.
Well, then in some ways we can't touch support staff. I mean, it's hard to meet your required hours in some ways for special educators with services.
Well, support staff also, you know, it's bus drivers, it's
Fair. Yeah.
bigger, there's other categories.
Yeah. I mean, we could not, I say we, you all, what is the transportation
You're part of
budget?
us.
I mean, talk about that as the consequences of not passing a budget. Transportation is something that is not required in the state of Vermont.
So without actually having the numbers in front of me, my guess is that it's, if you're looking just at the straight, delivering kids and picking them up and not looking at the athletic component of it, my guess is it's probably in the $600,000 to $800,000 range. So it's a significant chunk. This is a good conversation to have, because if you get to a point where we're talking about cutting programs, if you have to do it, the ideal thing is to cut programs that affect everybody. Because what ends up happening, like if you go and you cut athletics and then the parents are paying for their kids to go to athletics, you have now put a tax on those parents that only the parents of the athletic students pay, essentially.
Even enrollment's not yet.
Transportation is a good one because it affects everybody.
So I would argue it's also kind of regressive in that it hurts the people with the least funds and the farthest from school the most, and the ones who have no alternatives for getting kids to school. So I wouldn't consider that treating everyone the same.
There are consequences. to
Yeah,
this.
it's the contract. What do you? Right?
All right, so
So I'm not recommending doing any of that. I'm just, we're having a conversation.
So we're not gonna vote on the budget before the 15th.
I would argue that you should have a special meeting. At that meeting, you should be telling us two things. What, if any, cuts, the amount, 5%, 10%, 100,000, 200,000, what you want it to be geared toward. Like I said, in my case, probably the logical thing would be the Act 73 if there are any cuts at all. And then that will, and also at the same time, whatever, RIFs are associated with that, those letters should go out. And that way we're not riffing everybody, we can be much more selective about it. And again, with the understanding that, depending upon how you word that to me, those RIFs could be permanent, or, if you come back and you say, yeah, we got to meet we don't want to mess up, what our obligations are and get over obligated. Either those RIFs are permanent or those RIFs are temporary until the budget passes, and then we just send contracts to the folks that got the RIF.
Blaine, do you know if any principals have had conversations about not returning any staff members? That way it could be already built in.
We are getting close to the April 1st date. April 1st is when, we have to put the letters in probationary staff's hands of, we're contemplating a non-renewal. So there are 2 or 3 of those across the district. Again, haven't decided that they're being non-renewed, but that we're contemplating.
Because that could be a way, if you didn't fill that, because if you didn't renew and you didn't fill, then you're not necessarily ripping any teachers, you're just not filling, you're not refilling a position.
So it was a different board here at the time.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah,
You're ripping the
with
position.
different members is that, we talked about, or I think it was over a year ago, about the need for an attrition plan. And the messaging that I got from the board was don't do it.
Question, are all the teachers now teaching a full day of classes,
In terms of,
like periods, right?
Teachers at 100%. And that includes prep time where it's, contractually in there, and there are teachers that are half-time, but that also is what that's what they're paid for.
so that comes back to kind of the Act 73 discussion.
Yeah.
Right, you've got some classes that are way out of line. High school, if you do just a rough average of how many students there are per class, it's 9.
Yeah.
And so what the state under Act 73 would require is a minimum of 18. So,
It seems to me that Cavendish, if you put all those kids together, it's barely them enough to get, they don't have the class size. There's really no way to get it. I think only one grade meets even
Right.
close.
Yeah. we're actually, the April 16th, we can move it up. We were actually going to have that enrollment discussion. It's one that we had earlier in the year, so I've already got the slides and stuff ready to go.
How does that, I'm not sure how that works to increase the class size.
So on Cavendish, and our small elementary schools, across the district, which includes Ludlow, is in a lot of cases, they're not meeting those minimums either. They don't have enough kid unless they combine classes. In some cases, you would have to combine 3 grades to get it done, which just is not pedagogically sound.
But I don't think you can. Statute that says you can only combine 2 grades.
Yeah. And so the piece that I was putting pressure on, was this idea of, okay, Ludlow Mount Holly was open to it. They're putting a subcommittee together to hopefully have discussions with Green Mountain. Green Mountain, with the previous board that was here, as well as the open forums, was this idea is you guys should have a subcommittee as well that is meeting with Ludlow Mount Holly, because there may be a way to combine the students from those schools.
Yeah.
And there's a half a dozen ways to do it, to allow it to meet, the enrollment minimums. But again, those are things that the board is going to have to get behind and get their subcommittees together and start those conversations.
It's not something we can just decide on anyway.
Nope, it's gotta have those
Right.
rich conversations and start, having some discussions
I
about it.
might say that's a good idea, and they might say, I don't think.
Well,
so."
yeah, and that's, there was it a TRSU meeting when you were talking about that? And when you mentioned that maybe instead of looking to come down here, the 3 of them kind of come together.
There's multiple ways of doing it.
Yeah.
With 3 schools, what you do is, you have a school that's, K to 2 and one that's, 3,
Right.
so that way if you've got those banded grades at the schools are still open. They're not running at a full staff or anything like that, but you're meeting the
Meet your minimums.
enrollment requirements for those grades. The other possibility is you put them all together in one school, or you put them together in 2 schools.
Sure.
And then the part of the conversation between the 2 subcommittees would be, which schools would be. Okay. That's something that
How many kids are in Mount Holly? How many kids are in Mount Holly?
Oh, you're gonna quote me without it there.
No, just roughly.
100 plus.
And Ludlow has roughly.
Ludlow's a little under 100. Well, Holly's
Cavendish
actually
about 70.
Samantha Thomas has her hand raised.
sure.
Hey,
Go
can you
ahead.
guys hear me?
Yep.
Hi, so my daughter Cindy Thomas attends kindergarten at Chester Andover Elementary School, and my daughter Ellie Thomas is in 7th grade at Green Mountain. And I'm willing to get Ellie and whatever other kids together. Sorry, it's dinner time here, so it's a little chaotic. I'm willing to get Ellie and however many peers and make signs and stand outside town hall when the revote happens, so that taxpayers can see exactly how much money they will be saving, with the kids. Because I feel like they'll make a better impact than, just me or any other adult, really.
I'm writing your name down, so you're committed.
Thanks, Sam.
Thank
I
you,
am.
Sam.
Thank you.
Lane, you can't propose a check this or this when they do a vote, right? Like same vote, 19-1 or whatever, and then here's this one down at 18-2.
I've actually thought of that in the past, but I've never asked the question of legal. I'm happy to do that.
I am curious because if you hey 18-2 and we're cutting sports, nothing. I mean, as a teacher, nothing gets parents more upset than something with sports. You start taking those away, and so that's where school communities really form. As members that were part of the mascot discussion know, people get really fired up about these things. So I would say if you can do here's what we'll lose at 18-2, and we keep everything for $6 more a year. So I'm curious about that kind of thing because I just don't want to.
Are you talking about on the ballot?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think you can,
Discussion
but I'm
prior.
happy to
You don't
have
do
it.
that.
Okay.
That could be part of the forum before the vote. on the
Yeah.
ballot. So that's an important piece.
Right.
of it.
Right.
I also think that you're going to get more than 37 more votes if you scare parents by saying you're going to get your own kids back and forth to school when they're working. That transportation means a lot. And I get that it's not fair all the way across the board. I don't think there is anything that's absolutely going to affect all of the kids or the
No.
parents equally. Sports is a big deal for a lot of parents, but not for all of them.
Yeah.
So, I mean, but you don't need all or nothing. We could say we got this and that, and not one of these things alone is gonna meet the debt, the amount that we need to cut. So you might lose them both.
Well, we don't even know what the public, 37 voters, we could say we cut 50 grand out and the budget will pass. We don't know.
Right.
Well, we don't know. You know?
I think that the thing that people notice, the thing that bothered me when I was looking at it originally is the percentage increase. When it says 9%, that just seems ridiculously big. Even though it's a level service budget, when it's costing us 9% more.
So then the state purposely requires that language, and for the purpose, they chose, right, our budget really would have only increased like 3.2%. But when you look at it in terms of what you're spending per pupil, because that includes the grant monies that we receive that the
Right.
taxpayers aren't paying for,
Right.
the state did that on purpose to sync budgets. Yeah. There are a couple folks online.
Don't go to folks on
Yeah,
that.
don't lose your thought.
I
Peter Cherub.
Kirby,
Yeah,
I apologize if I butchered that.
that's so with that is, as I asked before at the other meeting, and looking at the central office like staffing, if I guess they can be considered a working staff, then if we're going to need to like reduce or do like say a curriculum coordinator is a teacher as well, they fulfill both roles, or is it really necessary to have a curriculum coordinator and other things at central office? And again, we rent the building. Why can't we utilize space that we have at other facilities instead of renting a building?
So I can answer actually both pieces easily. Remember that you are a union school district. So technically you only have 50% of the central office, even though we're providing full-time services to you. Because the other 50% of our time is spent over at Ludlow Mount Holly. So when you went through your Act 46 consolidation, you already got as much efficiency as you're going to get out of a central office and still be able to function. So I think that's important for folks to recognize. But it is a logical piece to jump to and understandable. It would be a little bit different if we were a school district. But we're not, right? We're serving 3 boards in 2 completely different districts, and the work that's required isn't quite double with 2 districts, but it's probably about 150%. In terms of the Fletcher Farms, Fletcher Farms has a requirement that their buildings be used for educational purposes. And so they have given the district a tremendous discount. Our rent there is $18,000 a year. I don't think that I could get an apartment for myself for less than $18,000 a year in most places in Vermont right now. So it makes sense to look at that because it's a beautiful space. But again, we're getting a really good deal. It does make sense to eventually move into spaces if we have them, but remember there's going to be some significant upfront costs to transform classroom spaces into office spaces with privacy and phone and everything else that's required there.
There was also discussion the last round, and that I mean, it's a perennial conversation about central office, and it's the central nature of it. It's not just Green Mountain, the central office,
It's the other,
Ludlow,
the other end.
as well.
and then so that was one of the points that was brought up. Yeah, the cost was much less actually than even being in some of the existing buildings. And I'm trying to remember, there was another very valid reason being there, escaping me right now, but because that was, like I said, that comes up every single time that central office is something building cost.
Yeah.
It isn't.
But it makes sense because it certainly looks,
Yeah.
I get it.
But I mean, we've explained it before, and I almost want to say that Fletcher Farms has added additional things at no cost, like use of the roost and that sort of thing.
Yep.
So there's another reason, but I can't remember it off the top of my head.
I think user is.
Yeah, actually, Scott, if that's you,
public comment.
and then we've got Mike.
You're not, but it is the agenda item. discussion, and so
Just making sure.
we're welcoming it
Just
as
making
long
sure.
as it's civil and productive.
It is me, Scott Kendall,
Yeah,
Andover.
go ahead.
Just wanted to state, like I put in the chat, threatening busing to pass a budget or threatening sports to pass a budget, that is not okay. You will not get a budget passed if you do that.
I don't disagree, Scott.
Yeah, I don't disagree either.
And I mean, the person that suggested that, I mean, he definitely called OSHA on the school. So
This is appropriate. So I don't know that it's any different to say we're talking about programs. I don't know that's any different than threatening a position that you're cutting. Like, I don't know that we're threatening anything. We're talking about where can programs be cut. And I don't know how it's any different than talking about busing isn't required. So if we cut a science position, we cut a math position, isn't that threatening a position?
that is threatening a position. Yep. There's programs that should be cut too, though. I mean, look at if you really want to get into it, go talk to your state reps. A lot of your state reps do not push the school systems. They just push them off and they fight amongst each other, and they constantly are blaming the schools for the high budgets, not themselves that are making it.
So I do think oh yeah, please,
Maybe
sorry.
Piggyback a little bit on what Scott was leaning towards. When do we have to meet the class size minimum requirements for Act 73?
So technically, their folks are supposed to be transitioning next year. If you are out of compliance for 3 years in a row, the consequences can be dire. In other,
But did the budgets that the principals put forward to create this budget reflect any start to that?
at this point, no, because we don't, the legislature is sitting on its hands and not telling us what they're doing and what we need to do.
I think Cavendish is working towards that because, for instance, we have a teacher retiring and we're not filling that position. We're moving into more multi-age settings.
Like, what
What
would
you
be,
say was returning?
I don't know if the letter came.
Then don't, I'll find out.
like, what was the, how much, I think I'm gonna rephrase that, how work intensive would it be for you to, or Cheryl, to let us know how much would be saved if we achieved minimum requirements? Like, how
Oh, I
many?
can have it because we've already kind of been working on it behind the scenes.
Okay, is that something that you could get to the board
Yeah, look at it.
prior to the next meeting? So that-
It'll be a good estimate. Yeah, I won't say, I can't say it'll be perfect, but it'll be a good estimate.
Yeah, Randy, go ahead.
Yeah, Randy Miles. Once again, I think you're missing the points here on with some of the people, taxpayers out there. I talked to a lot of different ones and just throw them out, like, a sentence and listen to what they have to say about it. They really have a feeling that we're not trying to keep things under control. We keep hiring more and more. And they pick out these little things, like when we talked about Todd retiring. Well, now there may be 2 positions filled out of that. Last year it was putting on the wellness program, cost a lot of money. They're more interested in focusing on educating each student individually, as educating, not giving them services and stuff like that. Public schools, they say, is an educational form for these students. The other thing is they don't see any cuts in it. I don't think they're looking for huge cuts. I think they're looking for something that the board is listening to them and seeing that you're making an effort. $80 may not be a big deal, but like I say, with everything else around them, that's $80, $90, $100, $200. It is a big deal.
That equates to 10 jobs.
Yeah. And we know what's coming. We know Act 73 is coming. This board is going to be making probably some of the hardest decisions moving forward once Act 73 starts really coming into play. So we know we're going to have to do that. If there are options to release teachers or whatever, not fill positions, you should be jumping all over that.
Well,
Because
that's
otherwise, teachers are going to get pink slips and have to let go. And nobody wants to see that. I don't want to see anybody lose their jobs.
As far, I think the administration is working on looking at ways to do that. We're not just not doing that. That is on the table. you know, the thing we gotta remember is the budget that passed last year was after a failed budget and cuts already made. This budget is reflecting that budget that was voted down and cuts made. It's the same budget.
Yeah.
So at some point, I get it, Rick. We have to try to save money, but cutting and cutting and cutting is gonna affect our kids at some point. So we gotta be careful how we approach that is all.
It's gonna affect everybody.
Yeah.
Teachers, administrators, communities.
Right.
We're in for a hard hit.
Yeah.
No matter how we look at it.
Agreed.
The other thing is that they bring up is they don't understand special ed, where all the money goes. What is, these students getting for this money? Some of them find it hard to believe that, 200,000, 150,000, 100,000, 90,000 is a lot of money. What are these students really getting for it? Are we serving these students? And we keep hiring more and more assistants and specialties for this. Things we, I guess, can't cut out of the budget once we get them on. So that's a serious conversation with them too. And that's a huge part of our budget. These are just things that I talk to average citizens about. This is what comes up. Thank you.
Go ahead.
The special education piece, we've got a person who's in kind of examining the program. A lot of the parts, and let's see if I can weave these pieces together. So there's a lot of things that we've got to get in place before we go into the budget season next year, which starts up in October. And so that's one of the reasons behind the scenes, we've been talking about, attrition, what would the restructuring look like to come in line with the enrollments. One of the reasons that we're rushing to get the program review done for the end of this school year in special education is hopefully that's going to point us in a direction where we can make modifications to service delivery, get students off of IEPs because they've acquired the skills they need to do that, and then the requirement for staff goes down. One of the reasons, without even the program review, because I've been in the business in Vermont for a while, that you see this surge in staff is for two reasons. One, because the state chose 3 or 4 years back to expand access for students for services. So it used to be that, if you had an academic deficiency, you couldn't keep up with your peers. An IEP was appropriate to help you access the curriculum. The state decided that students that potentially were deficient in what are called functional areas, should also get services as well. And functional areas are things like emotional regulation, impulse control, things that typically would be a medical concern or a mental health concern. And so what the state did is they shifted those responsibilities through that act over onto the schools to take care of. And so we saw an increase in the number of students being able to get an IEP based upon those new rules. But the types of students that we were now serving, right, the emotional regulation along those lines, we don't have the skills to fix. We can manage the situation, and the way that most districts do it is, if you got a student that lashes out and smacks the kid next to them, on a whim, you set a paraprofessional with them to kind of redirect them and keep them on task, but it's not teaching the student the skill they need to learn to regulate themselves. But those are the reasons that those populations have grown up. And so the focus of this program review is just that, is how do we switch our service delivery model so that instead of managing the behaviors for the kids, we're teaching them how to manage it themselves. If we can get a successful program, and I have seen ones that work, the population over the course of time will go down. But we're talking over the course of 3 to 5 years if the program is successful. It's not an overnight. So that work is happening, but it's not an instantaneous piece.
But that's a large part of what the community doesn't hear or see. And that's, the questions that come up. I mean, obviously there's information there, but they're not getting it. So maybe that on part of a forum, explaining what you can of some of this would go a long way.
Yeah, and I'm happy to continue doing that, but that has been happening for a while now. We gotta get people out and get them active and involved, because there is a lot of information out there. But we apparently got to find a better way of getting people connected.
So I want to thank you all for the conversation and that we were able to have it be a really broad conversation. But as we get close to 7, I also just want to make sure we're covering the focus of this discussion and can have more conversations about the budget soon. So if I'm understanding correctly, the fact that we will not have a budget passed by April 15th means that there will be some of these RIF letters that go out. And that, to me, the emphasis is that doesn't mean we want people to go in any way, that we will be working as hard as we can to get the budget passed, including like Sam's suggestion of being out there and telling people what it is that we would be losing if we do not pass the budget.
Quick question, when you said some RAF letters, do you have to pick and choose who gets them, or do they just go out
There's
with everything?
there's language in the contract that says these people will go first, it's based on seniority and position and things
Oh, I
like
see,
that.
okay.
That's not an us thing, that's between me and the principal, they'll figure it out.
And the technicality is it's the position that gets written out the body.
And then the big piece was to have the discussion and make sure we're getting the input from the Teachers Association. So if there are people online or anything else y'all would like to say or bring to it tonight.
I mean, I hope there doesn't have to be any RIF letters or RIF letters, as how we refer to them. If a budget is put forth that is the same budget that you have now, and taxpayers come out, and we get 37 more votes.
Well, we
Then-
still have to send, because we're not gonna vote before April 15th.
But there are non-union employees who don't follow that same timeline.
So without a budget, when we're looking at, trying to determine how many RIF letters may need to be sent, it's dependent upon that 3.1 million. There's no way to not touch a lot of staff, which is incredibly unfortunate. The hope is that, cuts are minimal, or maybe we put the same budget out and then, the RIFs go out, but that's just procedural until, hopefully the budget passes and we get what we need. Like I said, then the contracts immediately go out. As soon as that budget passes. I got to find out about the 30-day waiting period, but because after budget passes, it's not really passed until 30 days because people can contest it.
Will the meeting that gets held to discuss the budget that goes out, is that public? Is that
Yes, absolutely.
okay?
So the plan is that during this meeting, we will hopefully schedule a meeting for before April 14th. And that is when the board would be asking Lane and Cheryl which budgets to come back with. So we could be saying, we want one version that is exactly the same as what went out before, one that cuts 2% from that, one that is halfway between level funding and level services, that kind of thing. And then the April 16th meeting is the one where we will be scheduling a vote on that budget. So both of those meetings will be fully open and open for comment. And then if the board is warning a vote on the April 16th meeting, it's something like 30 to 40 days after that when the actual votes can take place.
Yeah, so we could technically, if the board, wants, 2 or 3 to choose from, and they would be making the choice at the April 16th meeting, we could bring in a blank copy of the warning because the language is the same. It's just the numbers. When you decide we fill in the numbers, then you can do the warning vote right then and there as well. You read it out. It just would have to be on the agenda as well.
So we don't have a date for that meeting before the 16th yet, but it will also be. We have a bunch of hands up yet, but we also have a public comment period coming. So is it Or are some of the people with their hands up part of the association?
Yeah, he was a teacher, right?
If I saw a
Do you want me to take
participation
over?
list, I could tell you
Yeah.
who was in the associate. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Thank you, Andrew. For some of them, started talking. John,
Andrew, you know, this.
So Andrew Maldy.
Great.
Hello. This is more of a question before public comment for sure. I'm not asking for a large response, but I'm just wondering, what is the difference between this year and previous years? So I'm remembering lots of times when people have, when the budget, like, hasn't passed and we've revoted. I just, maybe this is a lame question, like, what is that difference? And they can be very brief and very broad, but I would love kind of perspective.
Yeah, I don't know the context in previous years when I wasn't here, so I couldn't really comment on
I've
it.
been on the board the longest at
Yeah.
this point, which to me is amazing. But yeah, when I came home from the last meeting, and I said, wow, now I am not only am I the oldest board member, I have been on the board the longest. This is only the second time since I've been on the board that the budget has not passed. We have been, over the years, we have mostly passed our budgets. So it's not something that has recurred multiple times, not since I. And when I came on the board, I was pretty sure that the budget's generally. So that we don't have a lot of history, budgets.
I think Andrew's question though is why this time around are we getting rifts where I was present in this district when we did pass the budget? There were not rifts issued during that time.
So like I
why-
said, in terms of the past, I don't know the context. So somebody who knows that better at the time. In the here and now, you do not have a budget. April 15th, contracts auto renew, which means the district will have financial obligations that it does not have the money to pay for. Allowing that to happen is not appropriate, not ethical, may not even be legal. Right? You don't sign a contract if you can't pay for it. And that's the position they're in without a budget, is they do not have the money to pay for the obligations that are going to be incumbent upon them after April 15th if they do not act. It's a part of public trust. It's a part of fiduciary responsibility. Right? Because what could happen is all the contracts renew. Where now the board owes 19 point whatever million, and they're only capable of raising 16 million. How do they get that extra money to pay their obligations? They can't. The only thing that they can do is deficit spend, and deficit spending in Vermont is illegal. So again, it's kind of a procedural thing, but there is a logic behind it. They don't have the money to pay those obligations.
And John.
Oh, sorry about that. John, go ahead.
Oh, am I up?
Yep.
You are.
Okay. All right. I won't keep you long. My question is, and I've been doing this for a long time, and I do understand a lot of everybody's comments and what we're saying. And I have my own thoughts, which I'll talk to Lane about tomorrow more. Is there any way that we can expedite this process to come back either, or not either, but come back sooner than waiting to the 14th? Because if it's all a time span, the longer we wait, then it just pushes it further out there. Because we could come back, well, I'm talking for our school, but we could come back fairly quickly with either the same budget or a slight reduction to give options. But is there any way we could have that meeting sooner to get it warned and get it out there? Because the 14th is almost 3 weeks away. I mean, that's almost the warning period. So that's all I wanted to chime in on. Thanks.
Are you saying for the vote or?
No, for to come back to the board in a special meeting for them to vote on which budget we want to put back out, and then get it warned sooner than wait until the 14th or the 16th. So that's all.
Check about the town first.
Yeah, we said before the 14th, sir, not on the 14th.
Oh, okay, all right.
We said,
Yeah, but as soon as possible, rather than wait until nearer that date, I guess. So, thanks.
Okay. Thank you all again very much. I think we are wrapping up this particular discussion. And so now we are at public comment. Sam, did you have something for that time?
Hey, yes. So I just, I'm throwing it out there because I'm sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, Samantha Thomas, Chester, sorry. So this is the age of social media. Is there any way, I actually had just emailed John, and like I said earlier, my kids are in both Chester schools. I'm willing to help spearhead in whatever way possible, but is there a way that we could get a video out to the voters to kind of have just to reach more of an audience, right? Like I can't imagine it could hurt, as long as parents are willing and the schools are willing. But I did want to run it by the board, as well. Like what voting down the budget really looks like or means. I mean, if I'm more than willing to have my kids go on and say hey, you voted down the budget and this means this, we need to pass the budget.
Yeah, I think I think it's a good idea. We got to figure out what we're trying to commit to in terms of the next budget vote. So as soon as that's known, a lot of those parts and pieces in terms of the communication process can start to get rolled out.
Okay, and Lane, if I email you, is there any way you can send me that chart that you have?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. I'll email you after the meeting. And then just for my last public comment, and then I swear I'll stop. I do have to say it feels like special education is kind of under attack a little bit, just from other comments that were said tonight. It kind of feels like we're targeting, the most kids with the most needs. And I can tell you, just as a parent who does of a child that receives services, we are already feeling the lack of presence, the lack of support as is. So to hear that, that those things could be getting cut further really does concern me. And even, the kids that maybe be on IEPs for behavioral or anxiety or anything of that matter, kids are at school for hours and hours a day. I do feel like those services are rightfully addressed there so that they can be successful in school. So just to hear the special education, other comments and things that people don't understand it or that it could be getting further cuts is really, really troublesome to me. But hopefully we can, get a budget passed and it won't be, and hopefully everything won't be affected too much. So, and thank you guys all for your time and your attention to this.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Dan?
I just was gonna offer, in Springfield had time passing their budget. Sappa TV, sorry. When Springfield couldn't pass the budget, they got Sappa TV to interview kids and parents and families. It did flip the screen, so.
Yeah, that's great. And at the meeting before the 14th, that's one thing we want to do is have a formal plan for how we're going to get out in as many directions as possible and what what are the charts and talking points and those pieces. I think Scott was next, who's user on there.
I just wanted to state that special ed is the one thing that you can't cut, as the board knows. That's the one number that's set by the state or feds, and you're not allowed to mess with. So any budget cuts comes out of the rest of the budget, which there really isn't. As a board member that used to be on that board, there really isn't a lot to cut.
Thank you, Scott. Randy?
Yeah, one thing you got working against you too is the number of your budget. next year you're gonna soar well into 20 million if you pass the budget status quo. That's a big number. That's a big pound to get over that the taxpayers are looking at too. And I don't know how you deal with that, but it's there. The other thing I want to say is on special education, I'm not downing it. I'm saying every student deserves the best quality education they can get. I'm just wondering, are we putting the money towards that? Or is there an alternative way to get these students the education they truly need? That's all I'm saying. Every student, whether they're, high academic, middle, whatever, they all deserve to have the best education they can possibly have. But we have almost a third of our school is at a high impact level. That's a lot. And that pie chart is pretty much filled with that. So you cannot overlook that, is what I'm saying. That's a big number. And I'm just saying it's something, if there's something we can do, look at this, make sure those students are getting the best education for the best money possible.
Thank you.
I have one more question, and it's public comments, which means you don't have to answer it, but I know you can't put out two numbers, but can you hypothetically put out the same budget, but let everyone know that if this didn't pass, this is where we would be riffing and what the new budget would be? So you let everyone know at a public meeting, you say, we're going to put out the same one, but if this one does not pass, then the new one will be 18.1, 18.2, and this is what we'll cut. So you're kind of letting everyone know that this is it, or it is this number, without having to actually go ahead and make those cuts right off the bat.
Yeah, I'm not against it.
Yeah, no, that's perfectly.
Always nice. And it was proposed in the forum between the time we pick the budget that's going to be voted on and they vote on it. Something where people
Yeah.
can come to the town hall, ask questions, get answers. This is complicated stuff.
Yeah.
It is really hard to understand how it affects people and how, whether we cut the budget, it doesn't affect us much for taxes. What the legislature is doing is going to affect a lot. We have nothing to do with it. So, but people need to understand that, and it is not easy. So your chart was really helpful. If you could get more people looking at that chart, that would be a big help.
Lane, I would also add that I know riffing can be such a delicate subject, but I don't think it should be a secret what positions that would be, because if we have people standing at, in front of voting and listing, like, please say goodbye to, civics class, which is a new class that just got offered in social studies. Like if we're losing a social studies position, that could be one that has to go because it's brand new. Financial 101, a business math class that's not required, but where a lot of kids learning like how to do taxes and an interest rate and what that means. That could be a first to go. It's not a required math class. Forensic science, an interesting way of learning how to do some science classes. It's not required. Wilderness science class where kids get outside and learn how to make fires and all that kind of stuff. Not required. It could be cut. So I think if it's a secret because we're scared about like offending teachers that their position could be cut, that makes it less tangible. But when we actually talk about like people, positions, and programs, and we can list it for voters, that makes it far more realistic for the actual things that kids could be losing. And I think we have to be open about what they are.
Like Mike said, isn't that already preordained? Like we don't get to choose that, right?
But that absolutely. Well, not necessarily, because at the high school level, you could riff the position, right? Saying we're losing one math. But what would happen is you would then take the remaining math teachers and you reorient it and say, okay, now we're going to all have to teach different things. We have one less person to teach 4 classes. And now we need to drop what's not required for the state of Vermont to get your diploma. And so just because the position is gone, it doesn't mean that those specific classes are gone. Does that make sense? Okay.
Okay, I think that is our last hand. So we'll wrap up the public board comment and then the public comment and board comment. And then our last piece is to hopefully schedule this before April 14th meeting before we go and adjourn. So
What are we going to need before we have that meeting so that we can do it with the information we need?
Yeah, so I don't think we need much. So that is the meeting where we would be, as a board, asking for specific budgets. And it's that we'll need some time between that meeting and the one on the 16th for those budgets to be prepared. So how much time would you need for that?
Like I said, a lot of the work, depending upon what the board is asking for in terms of attrition, has been done at the elementary level across both districts. High school would take a little bit of time to go through. You know, I can get a rough number based upon what the averages are, but it would be more appropriate to kind of go in and pinpoint exact, you know, positions. So that would probably take 4 or 5 days, assuming additional fires to be put out. Pieces. The one critical piece of that meeting, however, is the board would need to vote to allow the RIF notifications to go. Right, that's a board piece. So you know, you can say, yeah, you know, you can get the RIFs out to make sure that we're able to meet our financial obligations until we get a new budget, or no, you don't, which is putting you in a bad position potentially fiscally.
So in terms of scheduling, I think the question is, are we doing this next week or the following?
I would say sooner than.
Okay.
Looks like there's a TRSU meeting next.
On Thursday. So is there another day of the week?
My schedule is open, it's, you know, the rest of the board, right?
Well, Wednesday is not good for me.
Okay.
The Friday first, it's so.
Tuesday, the 31st?
I can't.
That Lane, that probably doesn't give you enough time, does it?
Well, you haven't told me what you want me to prepare. I mean, I'm gonna look at this, the piece that Adrian brought up, just because we gotta do it anyway. So I may have information on that, but part of that meeting is either approving or not approving the ability to do, you know, the RIF notifications, and then what you want for budgets to vote on at the April 16th meeting. You know, we want you to prepare a budget with this for cuts, or with this for ads, or and that way we can actually generate those numbers and be able to come in.
When you're figuring it out, I would like to keep in mind what we need to do to comply with Act 73, so that we're moving in that direction with whatever decisions we make.
So, which is exactly what my recommendation would be. You've had an opportunity to kind of hear, which is appropriate, and kind of collaborate with the association. So I would argue that, you know, your job between now and that special meeting that's coming up is to decide what you want to do in terms of potential budgets. That meeting is where you tell, you know, Cheryl and I, we want you to, you know, create a budget that does this, that does this, that does this. We get those numbers together. We use it to calculate what people's tax rates would be, you know, what the impact, you know, would be on the average homeowner in terms of their annual taxes. We bring that information back to you on the 16th. And then on the 16th, you would vote on which budget you want us to put forward for the town to send out.
Are you able to both get sworn in and make the 31st?
I was told that the third will be back on the 30th.
Okay.
You can find a way to scramble if you would like that.
Okay.
I wonder if they can do it by Zoom.
I think there's just as like, there's ways, if you were to say, let's this, then.
Is that March? I'm sorry, I've heard numbers, but I haven't heard months.
This would be March 31st.
Okay, thank you.
Like 5 days.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a good day for district. There's not much going on in the afternoon.
I just want to clarify one thing. We've been talking about class consolidation and class size as part of Act 73, but it's not. That's already statute. It was passed in 2024. And it's 16 BSA section 165. So that has to be done. It doesn't have to be done as part of Act 73. It does have to be done, but they're two different.
Okay, so-
We're talking apples and oranges. I just wanted to be clear on
We
that.
gotta answer.
Yeah, we do. And if we can get it, I mean, we're supposed to be working on it anyway. So if we can work on it and it helps save money, so much the better. But I just wanted to be clear that we're not talking about the same thing.
Okay.
All right, so reasonable for March 31st, 6 p.m. here. Okay, and that is our next meeting. Please.
Can we pull in one?
So that is the meeting where we're asking for the specific budgets. So on the 31st, we would be saying, we want a version of the budget that cuts
We'll do it on the
2%.
31st.
No.
Yeah.
We're going to have the budget. We can print that out from being online. Is there something else that we will have available to, because there's a lot of financial stuff. How are we gonna know what would be best to cut? There's something else out there that we can look at? learn
So
about?
we
don't.
as a
That's not
board
us.
don't get to decide
That's
exactly.
That's the principals
what
and
would be
Lane.
cut.
We tell them what the budget is,
Okay,
they figure out,
but
and we help them with.
I
what
mean,
we
we
think.
can also make additional guidelines, like, and whatever you do, don't cut
okay.
X.
I'm just assuming that if we know what the consequences are for cutting certain things, we might decide not to do that or not to ask for a budget. And that we did hear some of that today. But I think that's going to be essential for being able to make an informed decision about how much
Well, the-
money to.
Principal be here, or
Look at
just online or something, so we can ask them questions.
Yeah, I can ask them to be in the.
We don't want to force them to come here, but if they can at least online, so that if we had a question, we could ask the average principal.
Okay.
How many this do you have, how many this do you have?
Right.
If we do this, what happens to you? And
Right.
can you function with that? Don't want to be unrealistic if we don't know what the facts are. You know, everything more. Yes, thanks.
Yeah, and then there can also be more of that on the 16th when we are actually voting on which of the ones will go. Where we can be really specific about, if we vote for that, these are the things that would be. So that's, I think, where we need a longer time between the 31st and the 16th rather than before.
I move to adjourn.
And is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay. Thank you all.